All right, good morning, AP Europeans. The purpose of this video, we're going to look at topic 2.4, the wars of religion in the 16th century. Specifically here, we're going to look at the efforts made by the Habsburg dynasty in Spain and in other parts of Europe to try to maintain and hold on to a Catholic unity, a single religion unity all across Europe in the face of all these Protestant Reformation changes that are going on. All right, so for the most part, when we have been talking about what is happening in the Spanish Empire or in the Habsburg dynasty, the person we've been talking about is King Charles I, also known as Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. So this is a picture of him like near the, closer to the end of his life. This is in the 1550s. The recap on him, if you remember him, he was really involved with the Diet of Worms. Look, there's Worms on the map here. This is the spot on the map where Martin Luther was called to trial by the young 19-year-old Charles I for his crimes against the empire, for his resistance and his protests against the Catholic Church. And, we talked about how Charles over the decades has overseen the growth of the Spanish Empire into the New World, how he has been also the Holy Roman Emperor and trying to maintain things in the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. Well, by 1556, Charles decides that he is going to abdicate. He's going to step down as being the monarch on this. And when he does so, this is the layout of what's really kind of happening here. On this map, you can kind of see like anything that's in the shades of blue, that's all like what was part of the Habsburg Empire while he was there, while he was king, an emperor. Um, Spain, of course, but this also includes southern Italy, the Netherlands. We'll talk about the Netherlands here in a couple of minutes, actually, and then like other parts of the empire where he has direct control over. And so some of this has got to do with his role as the grandson of Ferdinand and Isabella over here in Spain, but he's also into the Habsburg dynasty, which is where, like over here in Austria, this is kind of where the Holy Roman emperors have been coming from for a few generations now. When Charles steps away, his son Philip takes over. And when Philip takes over, he is going to be there for another 3 decades or so. So this is a pretty stable monarchy kind of situation. The things that kind of make Philip notable in the big scheme of things is that he's really going to reap the rewards of all of the new world gold and silver that's coming in. And by the end of his reign in the late 1500s, he's also getting the rewards of the plantation economy that's starting to come in and bring other levels of riches into Spain. This is huge for them on the money basis, makes them rich and strong and powerful, but it's also going to create that high inflation that in the long run is going to do some economic damage to them. They're going to be able to maintain supremacy in the Mediterranean Sea, and I kind of covered a little bit of it here in the map. But here in the 1570s, Italy is back here, and this is Spanish control. Well, Spain's going to have control over the Mediterranean thanks to these two. The main challenger to them was really the Ottoman Empire, and with the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, Spain is really dominant, not just on the western side of things, but on the southern side of Europe as well. And so this is kind of like characterizing them as being like, well, one of the major, if not the most powerful force in Europe altogether. There starts to be some chips taken away of this when you look at the Spanish Netherlands. And so this is a term is just kind of odd. The Netherlands are here, and you can see it's got this blue shading, and so it's under the control of the Habsburg Empire, under the control of Spain. So while we think of them being Dutch, they're really under like well, governmental control of Charles and then of Philip. Well, the thing is, up in the Netherlands, Calvinism is really a fairly popular movement that's going on. The Dutch Reformed Church is the Dutch Calvinist Church. As we have seen in other spots of this unit, the Calvinists are really big about rebelling against authority, and they are rebelling against the Spanish Catholic authority coming from the Habsburgs. Habsburgs have got a goal of spreading the Catholic faith kind of on a global scale when you're looking at this time period, and so this is going to represent a problem. Philip starts sending troops up there to maintain control of it. One of the leaders of this Dutch resistance and Dutch rebellion against them is William of Orange. Kind of dropping his name in here because he is kind of a father figure, like founding father of the Netherlands. When you look at them as an independent nation, kind of a central figure in their early formation. But if you're like, what's Orange? Well, Orange is like it's like a principality. It's a little, community area that's going on in the Netherlands. It's also why, if you are a soccer follower, it's why the Netherlands national team, their uniforms are like these really cool bright orange colors. This is why. It's kind of a callback to what they consider part of their nation's origins. Long story short, on the Spanish Netherlands, Spain keeps sending up more and more troops and spending more money to try to maintain it, but eventually the Netherlands declares their independence, like at least for the most part, they were declaring independence. Spain doesn't really recognize it, but in 1581, they declared themselves to be the United Provinces of the Netherlands, which is like their declaration of independence. And just like we've seen in other places in Europe, they're going to establish religious pluralism. Truth is, the Dutch aren't really that, as a overall nation of people, they're not all that dedicated into being a Calvinist. They're much more into like they're probably the most tolerant religious country here in Western Europe. They don't care what religion you are. They care about trying to take care of the Dutch. I've said similar things with like Philip the Fourth, or sorry, Henry the Fourth in France, or Elizabeth up here in Spain, and the Netherlands kind of fits that model. But as you can see, it's good for the Netherlands. They're a country that will start looking at kind of independently of everybody else in the next unit. But this is a sign that maybe Spain's dominant grip is starting to slip away here in the late 16th century. The Spanish power is going to continue to slip away thanks to this growing conflict that they're starting to have with England here in the last half of the 16th centuries. So this conflict really has its origins like on the family basis. There is some family tension between the Habsburgs in Spain, that's King Philip, and the Tudor family in England, that would be Queen Elizabeth. If you are thinking back to earlier on, you might remember that King Philip of Spain was married to Queen Mary of England. That's Elizabeth's half sister and predecessor. So when Elizabeth took over as queen, well, King Philip just kind of he made the claim that he should be king of England because he was married to the queen and he is definitely of royal blood. And so there is like this little bit of on the family dynasty side of things, this idea that Elizabeth shouldn't be queen. Within England itself, there's some questions about this from some people, but you remember, right? She's going to be queen for 45 years, and so she's got stability within her country. She also got stability in dealing with Spain as well, but I'm hoping you can see this is going to be a source of some tension between the two royal families. There is also tension between these two countries because of the two different religions. Catholic Spain and Anglican England, the Church of England. This is kind of the religious war angle to what's going on here. And so there's really the same sort of tensions that we've seen going on in other parts of Europe. But it's just this time around, we're talking about two of the major powers over here on the western edge of the continent. To make things even more tense, in the 1570s, England is giving aid to the Netherlands in their independence movement against them. Things get to the point where it looks like Spain may try to just jump in the middle there and try to do something to, attack England in some way. So in 1571, Elizabeth and her negotiators, they kind of work out a mutual defense pact with Spain. It's kind of an agreement that, hey, we're going to leave you alone as long as you leave us alone, and we're just going to like agree not to go to war against each other for a while. Um, the problem with that is, well, England kind of ignores some of that. There's still some secretive assistance being sent to the Netherlands. There's some nobility family connections that kind of cross the water between southern England and the Dutch coast that's there. And then when you start kind of adding in the layer of the overseas empire, well, it gets a little bit more tense because English pirate. I don't know what else to call him. Sir Francis Drake, for a series of like several years in the late 1570s into the 1580s, his ships are like out on the open seas. They're stopping Spanish ships coming back from America. And these are ships that are kind of loaded up with some gold and silver. Francis Drake is pirating, and he is like stealing this gold and silver and bringing it home to Queen Elizabeth. When Queen Elizabeth is asked by Spanish officials, "What are you doing with all this gold that you're stealing from us? Stop stealing this gold from us." Elizabeth's response is something along the lines of, "Well, I have no idea what you're talking about." And it's pretty clear that she does, just based on the pattern of events that's going on. And so by 1588, Spain, Philip, they've had enough, and so they send up the Spanish Armada. The Spanish Armada is the bulk of the Spanish fleet, and in this Spanish fleet, the idea is it's going to be the first wave of an invasion that's going to, well, take Spain and England to war against each other. And so on the map here, and this is a map from, from our textbook, Spanish Armada leaves from Portugal, actually, because there's a little bit of a unity going on down here. And as they come up and they get in the English coast, like all of these, it's like there's major battles that come along the way, and true statement, but it's really when they get in here in like the narrows of the English Channel, the thing that really does the most damage is going to be like there's a storm that comes through and kind of slows down some of the ships. And then when you get to like the major battle that happens through here, it's these smaller English ships that are able to move more quickly and be more maneuverable, and they're going to really have some success. And so England kind of wins the day, and they're going to do some serious damage to the Spanish Armada. Enough damage that the Spanish fleet has to return home. But because of trade winds and everything else, the way home kind of brings them around north, around Scotland and Ireland. And here, like all of these shipwrecks, there's a whole series of storms that come in. And so this big, heavy Spanish ships, a lot of these ships are lost here. So by the time these ships limp home, they actually have to go to like two different locations when they get back to Spain. And the Spanish war fleet is damaged enough that they're never really going to be able to recover. So it's not like the fleet's destroyed, but there's not enough of them left to kind of maintain, well, their defenses against pirates like Francis Drake and other ships that are going out there, and English and French ships that are going to start doing more exploration and setting up colonial settlements in America, starting with, Jamestown in 1607 and Quebec in 1608. That's a couple of Unit 1 kind of like proper nouns to drop in here. But at this point, Spain's really going to start to fade from prominence on the global scale, letting England and France and the Dutch kind of move forward. It's interesting to me that the College Board chooses to talk about this stuff here in the wars of religion. So while there's definitely a religious angle that's going on this, I'm hoping you are picking up that, at least from my end of things, what I would argue for on this is that this is really not about religion too much at all. Religion is one element to it, but it's about like the money and the power. Or if you think about this in terms of what's going on in some Unit 1 terms, this is about God, gold, or glory, all three of them coming into play, because they're all three kind of elements that are making all of these Western European nations want to expand their influence, well, in Europe and on the global scale as well. So end result is England is on the trend of moving up, Spain is on the trend moving down, and that's really going to shape things moving forward for the rest of this class. One last thing, this picture of Queen Elizabeth that's going on here with the big puffy sleeves, and you can see her hand on the globe here. Like the clothes on this, it's like we've seen in some of the other pictures before. They try to make the monarchs look larger than life. So she's got the same kind of overly decorated collar that we saw kind of like on Henry IV. The style on this painting is not as realistic as we've seen in some others, but the background tells us a couple of things too. The storm clouds and the dark gloominess outside of this window. Well, this is the coming of the Spanish Armada as they're coming into England. And so dark times on the horizon, but where things are much brighter and clearer in this window, that's the victory of the English fleet against the Spanish Armada. real turning point in the balance of power in Western Europe. Thanks for listening.